Sandra stood frozen in the doorway of the coffee shop, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The woman sitting by the window looked up, and their eyes locked. Without breaking eye contact, Sandra walked straight to her table, pulled out the chair, and sat down. She reached into her bag, withdrew an ancient Bible, and pushed it across the table until it touched the woman's coffee cup. "Open it," Sandra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Page 147. There's a note your mother wrote before she died. She was 19 years old, and she spent her last breath trying to find you." The woman's hands hovered over the Bible, frozen in disbelief. "I don't understand," she whispered. Sandra leaned forward, tears already forming in her eyes. "Your name is Lily, and I've spent 5 years searching every corner of this country to tell you that your mother never stopped loving you." The woman called Lily opened the Bible with shaking hands, pulled out the yellowed note, and read the first line. Then she looked up at Sandra and said the words that would change both their lives forever. "How did you find me?" Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's go back to where this all began. 5 years earlier, Sandra stood in her late grandmother's attic, surrounded by decades of forgotten memories. She was 27 years old, drowning in grief, and desperately searching for anything that might help her feel connected to the family she'd lost. Her mother had died from cancer 3 years before, and now her grandmother was gone too. The boxes smelled of mothballs and time. She'd been up there for hours, finding nothing but old clothing and yellowed receipts. Then her fingers brushed against something different, leather, cold and cracked with age. She pulled out a Bible so old the gold lettering had nearly faded away. The date inside read 1947. Sandra carefully opened it, and that's when she saw it. A piece of paper folded and tucked between the pages of Psalms. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if the writer had been racing against time itself. The note read, "To whoever finds this, my daughter's name is Lily. I had to give her up. She was born March 15th, 1968, at St. Catherine's Hospital. If you're reading this, please find her. Tell her I never stopped loving her. Tell her I had no choice. Margaret Rose Whitmore." Sandra read the note 3 times, her mind spinning. Margaret Rose Whitmore. That name meant nothing to her. She pulled out her phone and started searching. Within an hour, she'd pieced together a truth that shattered everything she thought she knew. Margaret wasn't her grandmother. She was her great-grandmother. Born in 1946, died in 1970 at just 24 years old. The family had never spoken of her. It was as if Margaret had been erased from history. Sandra spent the next 3 months consumed by the mystery. She contacted St. Catherine's Hospital, but the records were sealed tight. She hired a private investigator named Devin Hutchinson. 3 months and $3,000 later, Devin had found nothing. The trail was ice cold. Most people would have given up, but Sandra couldn't. Every time she looked at that note, she felt Margaret's desperation bleeding through the ink. Sandra started a blog called Finding Lily Whitmore. She posted photos of the note, told Margaret's story, and begged for help. Hundreds of people reached out, but none of them led to Lily. 4 years passed. Sandra got a new job, moved to a different apartment, dated and broke up with someone. Life continued, but she never stopped searching. Then on a random Tuesday in March, everything changed. An email appeared from a woman named Patricia Ashford, a genealogist who specialized in adoption reunifications through DNA databases. Patricia's message was brief. "I read your blog. DNA testing might be your answer. Let me help you." Sandra submitted her DNA to 3 major ancestry websites. For 3 months, Sandra checked the sites obsessively. But they were always distant matches. 7th cousins, people so far removed from her family tree, they might as well have been strangers. Then, on June 14th, a notification changed everything. A 2nd cousin match. His name was Trevor Montgomery. Patricia traced Trevor's lineage backward through marriages, births, and deaths, and there it was, a connection to a woman who had been adopted in 1968 from St. Catherine's Hospital. Her name was Lily Ann Brennan. She lived in Portland, Oregon. She was 56 years old. She existed. For 3 days, Sandra stared at the DNA website's messaging system, typing and deleting messages over and over. Finally, at 2 in the morning, fueled by insomnia and courage, she hit send. The message explained everything: the Bible, the note, Margaret's story, the 5-year search. Sandra attached a photograph of the note. Then she waited. 1 day passed, then 2, then 3. Sandra convinced herself she'd made a terrible mistake. On the 4th day, a response arrived. Sandra ran to the bathroom at work, locked herself in a stall, and opened the message with tears already streaming down her face. Lily had written, "I've spent 56 years wondering why I was given up. I never imagined I'd find an answer. Can we talk?" Their first phone call lasted 4 hours. Lily's voice was soft and warm. She told Sandra about her adoptive parents, the Brennans, good people who'd loved her fiercely but could never answer the questions that kept Lily awake at night. Why didn't my mother keep me? Was I not wanted? Did she ever think about me? Now, finally, she had answers. Margaret hadn't abandoned her. Margaret had been forced by her strict religious parents to give her baby away. Margaret had loved her daughter so much that with her dying breath, she'd tried to create a bridge between them. They agreed to meet in person. 2 weeks later, Sandra boarded a plane to Portland. The Bible sat in her carry-on bag, wrapped in protective cloth like the sacred artifact it had become. What if the connection they'd felt over the phone disappeared in person? What if decades of separation had created a gap too wide to bridge? The coffee shop Lily had chosen was small and cozy, with exposed brick walls and the rich smell of fresh ground beans. Sandra arrived 15 minutes early, ordering a tea she wouldn't drink. Every time the door opened, her heart stopped. And then, at exactly 2 o'clock, a woman walked in. Lily looked exactly like the photographs Sandra had found of young Margaret. The same hazel eyes, the same high cheekbones, the same quiet grace. Their eyes met across the room, and in that instant, 56 years of separation dissolved. They met in the middle of the coffee shop, and without saying a word, they embraced. They were lost in a moment that had been 56 years in the making. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying. Sandra pulled out the note and handed it to Lily, who took it as if it were made of glass. Lily's fingers traced the words, her lips moving silently. When she finished, she looked up with eyes full of tears and said, "She loved me. I always hoped she did, but I never knew for certain. Now I know." They talked for hours. Sandra shared everything she'd learned. Margaret Rose Whitmore, born in 1946 to the strict Wallace family. She'd fallen in love with her high school sweetheart, Jackson Pierce. When Margaret got pregnant at 17, her parents were horrified. They sent Margaret to a home for unwed mothers. Margaret named her daughter Lily and held her baby for 3 hours before the nurses took her away. Margaret begged to keep her child, but her parents were unmovable. The adoption papers were already signed. Margaret returned home hollow and broken. She never recovered. 2 years later, she died from complications of pneumonia, but those who knew her said she'd really died of a broken heart. And Jackson? He was drafted and sent to Vietnam in 1968. He died in combat in 1969, never knowing he had a daughter. Lily listened with tears streaming down her face. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of a young woman with dark hair and a sad smile. "My adoptive mother gave me this when I turned 18, Lily said softly. "She told me it was my birth mother. She said my birth mother had loved me and had no choice. I've carried this locket every day for 38 years. Sandra stared at the photograph. It was Margaret. The Brennans had known. They'd kept this connection secret for decades, waiting until Lily was old enough to understand. They'd given her a piece of her past, tangible proof that she'd been loved. Over the weekend, Sandra and Lily became inseparable. They discovered they shared the same laugh. Both loved gardening and classical music. They had the same habit of biting their lower lip when concentrating. Lily introduced Sandra to her 2 grown daughters who welcomed Sandra with open arms and teary eyes. On Sunday, they visited Margaret's grave together. It was in a small cemetery under an oak tree. The headstone was simple. Margaret Rose Whitmore, 1946-1970, beloved daughter. No mention of her being a mother. Lily knelt down and placed white lilies at the base of the headstone. "Mom, I'm here. I found you. Thank you for leaving the note. Thank you for loving me." Sandra stood behind her, one hand on Lily's shoulder, feeling the weight of 3 generations finally reunited. The sun broke through the clouds at that exact moment, sending shafts of golden light through the oak tree's leaves. But life had one more challenge to throw at them. 3 weeks after returning home, Sandra received a phone call from Lily. Lily had been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The doctors were optimistic, but Lily was scared. She was tired of fighting alone. "You're not alone anymore," Sandra said firmly. "We just found each other. I'm not losing you. We'll fight this together." And they did. Sandra flew to Portland every month. She sat with Lily through chemotherapy sessions, held her hand during the scary moments, and celebrated every small victory. Lily's daughters were there too, creating a circle of love and support. The cancer was tough, but Lily was tougher. 6 months later, Lily was declared in remission. Sandra had relocated to Portland permanently by then. They'd become more than family. They were best friends, confidants, 2 halves of a whole that had been split apart by circumstance and finally reunited by fate. On the 1-year anniversary of their first meeting, they returned to Margaret's grave together. This time, they brought a new headstone. It read, "Margaret Rose Whitmore, 1946-1970, beloved daughter and mother." Beneath that, they'd added a quote from the note, "I never stopped loving her." Finally, Margaret's complete story was told. Finally, Lily's existence was acknowledged. Sandra often thought about the chain of unlikely events that had led to this moment. If she hadn't gone into that attic, if she hadn't opened the Bible, if she'd given up after the private investigator failed. So many ifs, so many moments where everything could have gone differently. But it hadn't. Against all odds, Margaret's note had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had brought her daughter home. Some nights when Sandra and Lily sat together on Lily's porch, watching the Portland sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, they talked about Margaret. They imagined her as she must have been at 17, young, scared, heartbroken, but still brave enough to believe that love could transcend time. Lily would touch her locket and smile. "She's with us. I can feel her. She knows we found each other." And Sandra would nod, because she felt it too. Margaret's presence in the evening air, in the shared laughter, in the way Lily's daughters had their great-grandmother's eyes. The dead aren't truly gone as long as the living remember them. The Bible still sat on Sandra's bookshelf, its leather cover now even more worn. The note remained inside, tucked between the same pages where Margaret had placed it over 50 years ago. Sometimes Sandra would take it out and read those words again. "Tell her I never stopped loving her." And she had. She'd fulfilled Margaret's dying wish. She'd found Lily and told her the truth, that she was loved, that she was wanted, that she'd never been forgotten. In the end, it was just a note. Just a few sentences scrawled on yellowed paper by a heartbroken teenager who never imagined her words would survive half a century. But those words had changed everything. They'd reunited a family, healed wounds that had festered for decades, and proven that love, real, deep, sacrificial love, is the most powerful force in the universe. It transcends time, death, and circumstance. It waits patiently in old Bibles and locked hearts until someone is brave enough to go searching for it. And when you find it, it changes everything. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that remind us that love never dies. It just waits to be found.